we're talking about growth, but we're also talking about growing pains. And you're not growing unless it is painful, unless you do go through some trials, some tribulations.
Welcome, friends, to the Budo Brothers Podcast. My name is David, and joining me, as always, are Eric and Kyle, founders of Budo Brothers. You guys ready to
do this?
Game on. All right, so we're going to talk about something that was also the title of an old TV show called Growing Pains.
Nice.
And we're not going to talk about the TV show, but I want to talk about the pains of growth, pain through growth. And so, do you remember a time where you were doing something that you know you were struggling and growing through, and were experiencing that kind of pain or hardship while doing so? And what was that thing?
I get taken back to my Taekwondo days. I started in Taekwondo when I was about 5 years old. I was obsessed. I would not stop bugging my mom until she put me into Taekwondo and wanted to be the spin kicker, flipper kind of guy. And I remember I was in it for about a year and a half and coming up on 2 years. And I can't remember. I think it was my green belt, or I think it was my green belt. Either way, we had to break a board, and it was causing me a whole lot of angst. I got worked up. You know, when you're at that age, I must have been 7 years old, and you're still figuring out what you can and you can't do. And breaking a board sounds really difficult. Like, that sounds like that's going to hurt my hand. That's going to hurt my foot. Like, I have to jump over 4 dudes and break a board. And if I don't do it, I don't pass. And so that, man, I remember, I literally remember I could not sleep. Like, I literally had to like sleep in my mom's room. Mom,
he was 22.
Mom, I can't sleep.
I was waiting for that. That's really funny.
Love you, Mom. Anyway, I remember just getting so worked up, and it was such a part of growth for me, and it was painful because you kind of wish-wash. I can do it. I can't do it. Oh, what if I don't? Oh, what if I do? And you're kind of wobbling, right, until you find that certainty on the other side of that challenge where the growth takes place. So that for me sticks out the most.
Yeah.
Kyle, what about you?
Kyle, what about you, man?
I would say when you first said growing pains, I thought back to high school because like I was just short and it was painful that everybody was growing and I wasn't. So there was like this lack of growth that was happening, but I couldn't really help that. But on a more personal side of things, I would say reading for me was tough in school. I was deemed a slow reader in my class, and for whatever reason, I couldn't focus and just read. Still can't do it.
Me neither. I was gonna say,
I don't love doing it.
I'm the same, man.
But what we had to do when we went to university, we had to take an elective outside of what we're passionate in. So I was in kinesiology because I love the human body, and I took English.
Oh boy.
If you see how I type an email, you would know that English was going to be a challenge for me. So I did a university level English course, just hating reading, not liking like writing the English language, having to write these things. I feel sorry for my teachers because like they must be like, we could just pass it. Like, come, just one more, make it through without this spelling mistake. Okay, we got it. But I did it. I worked really hard, and after doing that class, I was the best at comprehension, reading, all those types of things that I've ever been. Now I've let it go because I haven't been practicing it. Like you've been writing a book.
Like a muscle.
Yeah. But I grew to a point where I was so proud for going through that class, putting in the work, growing, and making it to a point where I got a 70 in that class. And like I was jacked about that 70.
Dude, I have a confession to make while we're talking about slow reading. Man, I cannot watch movies with subtitles. They switch every time I'm halfway through the sentence. It's like, next. Like, nope. Okay, I have no idea what's going on here.
So Eric's never watched a dubbed martial arts
No.
movie.
I make up my own storyline. I'm like, all right, this guy's really mad right now. So awesome. I listen to audiobooks. That's what I do. I crush 70 books a year on Audible. That's my go-to jam. I fill my dead space, my car time, my cleaning my condo time with an audiobook. Because if I'm going to do something that I hate or don't enjoy, I might as well learn something. And it actually makes it a lot easier to do when you can learn something.
So speaking of growth
Absolutely.
and saying learning knowledgeable things all the time is growth, what are your guys' 3 favorite books or podcasts out right now?
David, hit it.
Ooh. Oh man. Okay, so I'll start with a podcast. So one that comes to mind, apart from this one, is the Tony Robbins podcast.
Nice.
And I went ahead, and what I usually do is like I'll pop one on from time to time when like I take the dog for a walk, because about like a half hour I'm outside, I'm walking around. That's about how long, like a good listen or getting into an episode is. And he had one where he had basketball legend coach Tom Wooden on there. And there just always seemed to be something of value. And I started getting to that point where it was like, if I'm just walking with my dog and just not listening to anything, it started to feel like a waste of time in a way. I mean, it's not a waste of time because I don't want him pooping in the house, but you know what I mean? But like my brain is inactive. And so why not put something in it that's really positive and really good like that? As far as a book, I'll tell you about one that I'm reading right now, which is called The Soul of an Octopus. And, it's a really interesting book on that animal and how they are much more intelligent and feeling. Octopuses, they'll dream. They're incredibly intelligent. They use tools, and it really kind of makes you think about really like what is sentient, like what is intelligent life. And if there is a creature that dreams. I mean, the question that I always end up is, should we really be deep frying it?
Right.
I mean, just to kind of put it in those terms, but it's a fascinating read. I tend to gravitate towards older, written works. And so, the one that I've got a tattoo and tribute of it and everything is Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which was very, very formative. Yep, absolutely. And really formative for me, and particularly in terms of just being an individual and following your own path and not taking no for an answer when it's something that you desperately, desperately want. And so I would say that those 3 right now are the ones that would pop into my head.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
What about you, Kyle?
What about you guys?
So it's been weird since COVID started. I don't know what, but I've had a hard time listening to my go-to podcasts.
Oh, yeah?
Just because like I listen to Gary Vee a lot, Gary Vaynerchuk, because of its marketing inspiration and impact theory. Also Jay Shetty's podcast. But lately, since I've just been like not wanting to listen to those things, because like for whatever reason, like I'm not on like a heavy growth business driven thing, because we're kind of in a systematic phase, like just focusing on nuts and bolts,
building bricks.
So I've been listening to more books, and I would say you put me onto the book. The best book that I've consumed lately is The Perennial Seller.
Oh, dude, by Ryan Holiday.
Yes, by Ryan Holiday. That book was crazy.
10 out of 10.
It's just all on the creative process and how to take something like from your head and bring it out and share it with the world, and how it can, that gift to the world can consistently interest people and provide value. So it's considered a perennial seller because you can consistently sell it over time.
It's a work of art that just doesn't go away. It outlasts the artist. Like how many books that are literary classics that are 200 years old,
Right.
And then the other book I read, it's an old book. I don't even know when it was from. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning. And it wasn't like sometimes the older books, you have to really dig in to get the meat and potatoes out of it. But this was about a psychiatrist who was locked in the concentration camps in Germany. And it was just all on how he viewed life and how they would find meaning even in like the worst, most terrible situations imaginable. And so it was one, like he goes through his whole experience living through the camp. And then two, he talks about it from like a psychologist's point of view, how people made it through and persevered through. So I definitely recommend that read.
That's pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Eric?
Man, I'm okay.
Give us some more.
So one of the books that I just fell in love with that just got me on this hoorah entrepreneur path is Unscripted by MJ DeMarco. Unscripted, MJ DeMarco. Man, it is. I listened to it probably 2 years ago because I only listen to books.
Does he talk about Michael Jordan? Is that one? Is that though? And like, was it Kobe or Michael? Was he the coach for them? I'm just trying to remember.
No, I don't think so. I think
okay.
I know what book you're thinking.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
I don't think it's that one. But it's because we've all been told this script. Go to school, get a university degree, go into debt, get this, do this, buy an expensive house that you can't afford. We've all had this script prescribed to us, and oftentimes when we follow this script, we wonder why we're not fulfilled. It's because you're living somebody else's script. It's not your script, and that's what the whole book is about. Is like talking about getting unscripted, how to go out, chase your passion, provide value, serve others, and live a fulfilled life of entrepreneurship and the pursuit of happiness and liberty. Like it's a really, really powerful book. So if you're on the fence of thinking about entrepreneurship, this book will tip you over the edge because you'll listen to it and you'll be like, all right, I'm quitting tomorrow. And this is what I'm gonna do.
Mom, I love you. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be a catalyst for growth. We're talking about growth, but we're also talking about growing pains. And you're not growing unless it is painful, unless you do go through some trials, some tribulations, get your knees scraped, fall down, get back up, because you're trying something that is outside of your current capability, and you will mess things up, and it's going to be painful. But that's what growth is. It's a process. And that's why we can't be afraid of things not working out, because that discomfort that we all get when we're about to go try something new, you're about to jump off a high diving board, that hesitation, you're growing, because that feeling that, oh, should I do it? Leaning into that and going into the barrel of the wave, and ride that wave. That's how you get to that place of growth. And so anyhow, that book, Unscripted, is one of my favorites. You stole mine from Daniel Seller because I would have to put that on my list. But one that probably had one of the biggest impacts on me from a mental side of like a mindset perspective is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. That was the book that really snapped me into present time. And it really helped me stop regretting the past and worrying about the future and actually extracting joy out of the present moment. And it literally, that book changed my life. That I have to put that on my list in terms of books that have had a meaningful impact and helped me grow. And even in that, like it was a beautiful book that did help me grow, but man, it's still painful when you shed your old skin and you let go of things that you've held on to. That's painful as well.
And I don't think you can grow just by listening to books, just by listening to podcasts. Like it can spark the idea, spark the brief bit of motivation within you. But if you don't turn those thoughts, ideas, and motivation into actions and test things and go through the motions,
get off the couch.
You can't grow. Like you could read about martial arts all you want. Like I could read, okay, punch, okay, move my head, okay, yeah, all right, yeah.
Right,
and then when you get in a sparring match, try to recall that on the fly. Like that's impossible.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to grow, it's important that you don't only rely on motivation. You have to put it into action, and you have to have perseverance through the failure.
Love it.
You know what's interesting about what you just said, because it brings up that quote again of everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And an episode or two ago, you had mentioned that one of your favorite things to do was to punch kids in the face.
We got to throw that into some context.
Now let's clarify in context, right? Not just randomly. But as you're teaching them that, like, to not be afraid of that punch coming at them, they're going to get hit, you know, and that's a perfect example of growth through some form of pain. And a lot of times, one of the things that I noticed when I was teaching was that pain was almost always self-inflicted psychological pain. You know, just like you were saying, Eric, like you were almost like there was a fear around that board breaking, you know, and that you like, I gotta hang out with mom because I need some comfort right now, because that board is kind of scary. You know, and same with the kids. And now, do you notice, or do you find that since you've been through this and you've been through some of these growing pains over and over and over again, that you can easily recognize, or more easily recognize, when somebody is going through that and they're at that sticking point where they've got to move forward, but there's a pain there? Because for me, I ended up being able to recognize that so much faster, having been through the things that I've been through. And so I was able to talk to somebody and say, hey, listen, look, I know this is really, really hard right now, but like, we're going to get there, and you got to be a little patient with it. And this is just part of the process, you know, and it's part of that hard work. Do you find now that when you see somebody struggling, you start to recognize that they're stepping over some of those growing pain hurdles, so to speak?
Definitely. I mean, once you've gone through the process a number of times, you exactly that. It's a pattern that you start to recognize. And often you can see it where someone is so close, you know, and most of the time, like you said, it is a mental block. It is the fear of what other people think. It's the fear of letting people down. It's the fear of
success.
Right.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people back away from that and go back to comfort. What's comfortable? What warm blanket that I know I can wrap myself in? Well, guess what? Warm blankets don't make you grow. All right. Like, it's the truth. Muscles don't grow by sitting on a couch. Muscles will atrophy if you do not stress them and subject them to pain. Your brain atrophies if you do not exercise it. Everything atrophies. If you're not growing, you're decaying. And that's really part of the whole growth cycle, is enduring. When you're doing 100 push-ups, that's painful. But you know what? You start to learn to like that pain. You start to, you know, when you work out, and at first it's I got to lift these weights. I got to do this. I got to do that. Soon you start to change the conversation in your mind. Like, oh, one more. Yeah. Did it.
Right.
That felt good. And then all of a sudden you're buzzing off endorphins. Man, that's growth. And so it's the same thing in life. When you're about to push something and getting it, and it's going to hurt to push it across that line. But once you've got it, I did it. You've grown to another level.
Right. Growth is a mindset. It's a choice. You can choose to grow. And that's why it's an infinite game.
Nice.
You can do it forever, for the rest of your life, if you choose to. There's always some area in your life at any moment in time where you could grow. Whether that's physically, hitting the weights, getting stronger, faster, whatever your case is. Whether it's mentally challenging yourself to handle situations different, being smarter in certain situations, or even emotionally, not reacting a certain way, or just dealing on the emotional side of things. Growth always happens.
Now, I want to pivot this discussion just for a moment here. Because we're talking about, you know, some martial arts stuff and boards when you're 7 years old and like that kind of stuff. So even in those terms, you know, if I have a kid in the dojo and he's 7 years old and he's struggling with the board, we work our way around that, you know, try it again, another time, next day, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we talk about in terms of business, where there is a significant amount of risk involved, growing pains become a lot more serious because there's livelihoods at stake. There's all kinds of mistakes can lead to either, you know, financial ruin and quickly, or just complete misdirection. So can you give me some examples of growing pains in business that you've had to navigate through, and which ones maybe really got you guys?
So I definitely could talk to the growing pains in business. And I could see a lot in entrepreneurs where they're at in a cycle, because, you know, I've been doing it for over 12 years now, like for real. And you have too. Same. So for me, I had a business go belly up. So I had a gym and I put my heart and soul into that thing, man. Like I went through all the pain, all the struggle,
all in,
and gave it everything. And it was the first realization in my life that made me realize that hard work doesn't always equal success. And you have this vision when you start entrepreneurship of where you're going to get and the time frame you're going to get it in. Mm-hmm. And if you're like most entrepreneurs, it's pretty unrealistic. Like when you start, you're like a 20-year-old person, you're like a teenager, and you're like, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have a yacht and a Bugatti and who knows what. And you're almost naive at that point and reckless. And being naive and reckless got a hold of me. I made some, you know, bad choices with the space that I was moving into, the type of business that I ran, and it went up in smoke, it went up in flames, and it was devastating. It shook my world up because everything that was my North Star, my truth, flipped on its head, went straight belly up. And I was in the gutter. I'm like, am I good enough to do this? Am I good enough to make it in entrepreneurship? And then I stopped the pity party. I got back on the horse, and no joke, literally within a few weeks, and like on the side, I was building Budo Brothers on the side of this first business. We've been in it a few years just because it was a hobby. It's what we did for fun.
Yeah, it was a passion project.
And so I lost this, and I had to go back to the watering hole and get a job. And it was a shot to the freaking heart, like 22 shotgun shell right to the heart. And it blew me apart because I had I identified as an entrepreneur. I identified as a businessman. And now here I am working as a assistant teacher in a school that like I didn't even plan on being there. Yet it was a great job. I have nothing against it, but it's not who I am, who I was at the time.
Right.
And so I was in a low place, but I took all the stories and the what ifs and the, oh, you're not good enoughs and all the negative stuff, and I just kind of pushed it away. And after you pushed all that away, what you're left with are the lessons from your past experiences.
Totally.
And taking those lessons now and everything I learned, like the marketing, the strategy, the sales, the like innovation, thinking on the fly, all those things I learned about entrepreneurship that are standard in any business, I now own them. They're mine.
It's an asset.
They're my tools.
Dude, exactly. You learned. So Kyle, you spent 12 years marketing your gym online. You learned how to do Facebook marketing. You learned how to do all the social media marketing on the planet for a saturated market, which is a difficult market, fitness, gyms. And you took that asset and now plugged it into what we're doing at Budo Brothers. And now you see what lined up, what gift was there like that. And it never makes sense until you look at it in the rear view. until you connect the dots.
And for any entrepreneur who is just starting the process or is in the process and has that fear of losing it all, that's what you have to get comfortable with the most. You have to be comfortable with losing it all. And now I know strategies on how to make that better. Don't overspend on shit. Live a comfortable lifestyle.
Right.
Live with people or live in a situation that's very manageable. Don't try to outlive anything, because in the game of entrepreneurship, only 10% make it through. 90% of businesses fail. So I learned those lessons, and I learned how to live humbly and carefully.
I've never met a human who can stretch $1. It's insane.
And learning that, it takes away the fear of losing it all.
Because you've done it.
I've done it. I've been to the bottom, and I swam around there,
Yes.
met the sharks. Like,
Yeah.
it was cool.
You stared
Called
them in
one
the face.
Nemo. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like you're not an entrepreneur until you are a grown human and have been brought to your knees and cried. You know, as a grown ass man myself, until you've actually been brought to, like, beaten down by it. Like, man, it's
Right.
just part of the game. It's part of the game. And it's like drilling for oil. You're going to hit dry hole, gusher that pays and amortizes all of the prior losses and makes the journey all worth it. And every dry hole, you learn something about the formation. You learn something that now leads you to where you're supposed to be. And that's the path. That is the entrepreneur's journey.
And in the case of martial arts, it's like relating it to never getting beat in a fight. Kind of when you get into sparring or into martial arts and you've had a lot of success, you've won a lot of your fights, you get that kind of fear and anxiety around getting your ass kicked.
Right? You got to keep
And then that one day comes along where you get your ass kicked and you realize, man, it's not so bad. The biggest thing that was worry was my ego. Like that took the biggest beating.
Yes.
And from there, you're like, I can handle loss. I can handle those things. And you become more courageous, more risky, less fidgety. Like you could sit into the art more. You could enjoy the match.
Yep. Say thank you to your opponent. You beat me and I'm going to learn from it. And there you go. Right. I mean, that's, there's a growing pain there, but you've got to learn the lesson on top of it all.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the truth.
Now, what else in terms of a growing pain? What do you think, in terms of martial arts? And actually, let's talk about a little bit of entrepreneurship in martial arts and maybe some advice, because one of the things that when I was in the industry and really into the industry and my school was humming along, that people would always say to me is, "Hey, open up a second location. You know, we want to see more, there will be more of you, and this school's a success," and so on and so forth. And that is a very alluring swan song, right? That's a really alluring thing to listen to, is people that want you to grow and expand and everything else. But along with that came the knowledge, just from talking to a lot of other experienced people, that was absolutely the worst thing I could possibly do at any point in time, unless my school was really going along well. So there seems to always be that point where you can mitigate the risk a little bit, where it's like, okay, I've got good advice. I've got a little bit of a war chest here. Now I can start taking some risks, and I'm going to grow along the way. But at what point do you just kind of decide to take the plunge into something and expect there to be some pain in doing it? Or do you just wait until there's a safer scenario to do so? Do you have any experience as far as there was something that you really wanted to do with Budo Brothers that maybe you held back on a little bit until you were in a better place, just to mitigate the growing pains from it?
So that brings me to validation.
Okay.
Way that what we learned from our mistakes. We have made a number of mistakes where we felt like, oh my Lord, this product, people are gonna go nuts for it. And then we back up the truck and crickets. And we've had it where products sit on the shelf for like 3 years, where we didn't bother to ask the community that we're serving if this is actually valuable. Is this something that you would see value in? Whether it's an apparel product or a training tool or a digital seminar, we are constantly looking for information from the community in which we serve. And what we've really gotten good at is testing our ideas. We engage our community and say, hey, we're thinking about this. What do you think? Good example. We have been working with a local knife artisan, and he's a old school blacksmith kind of guy. I mean, he's got a forge. He's got a forge in his garage shop, and he has spent his life working on knives. He is a knife enthusiast, and he loves making knives, and he likes to literally forge the steel that the knives are made out of. And that's amazing. So cool, yeah. So cool. And talk about what a labor of love, because each blade isn't rolling off an assembly line in China. Each blade takes hours and hours of grinding and bathing and polishing and sharpening and honing and go on and on and on. And part of his soul goes in every single work of art that he produces. And when we met him and we talked about his passion, like it was very evident, like this is why he is on Earth.
Yeah. His name's Buddy. He's an amazing guy. We'll be sending some videos of him, filming some videos of his knife making process.
Buddy, he's a legend.
Cool.
So we met him at a pub, and we were catching up over beer, and he showed us some of these beautiful knives that he's been working on. And there's this one called the Kiridashi, and it's this beautiful Japanese knife. And we were like, man, let's help you get these out. Like, let's collaborate. And thought it was a good idea. So before we went and backed up the truck and said, hey, let's take 100 of these, we wanted to go see if the community is interested. So we threw it out. We sent out an email. We're like, hey, we're thinking about getting into the knife game. What do you guys think? And the response was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. People were like, wow, that's really cool. Love it. Want to support local. And I really feel like that pendulum of outsourced overseas manufacturing that swung so far and gutted a lot of really talented North American companies is now swinging back. People now start to care about where their things are made. They're starting to care about things like environmental footprint, working conditions, and supporting artists, supporting, especially now when we're all kicked down. We're all in the dirt right now. I mean, we've all had challenges. Sure, there's businesses that have boomed in this time, but the majority of us are going through hard times right now. And the more we can support each other and the more we can buy local, the more local produce you buy and the more local goods you consume, the more wealth you're keeping in your community, the more vibrant the ecosystem becomes when those nodes are shorter distances. And that's what we're really excited about in this next phase is we want to start moving our manufacturing from overseas to local. And that's going to be a long process, but we want to get there. We want to be able to do that.
So with the business perspective on that is having that over demand, that over surplus, the want for it. So going back to your point on the martial arts studios, sometimes you suffer from the more is better syndrome. Or, oh, I need more. More is better. More is better. More is better. If I have more studios, that'll mean more money. I'll serve more people. But it waters you down and it stretches you thin.
Right.
If you're a studio owner and you are currently struggling to keep your one space in perfect condition and operating efficiently, cut that in half when you divide it into two. And you lose the heart of the place if you're the main character or you're the main energy within that space, because you're now relying on employees or people who aren't 100% involved in the place to take that up and to run with it. And so when it comes to growth, you have to have surplus and abundance falling out your pocket before you decide to expand like that. And we realized that with our company, and I know it's risky saying that because we haven't been stroked any checks yet, but we really want to make this a lifestyle business and go after it slowly because
Slow build.
we don't need to go in, take on a whole bunch of equity from debt and things from random people and water down what it is we're trying to do.
All of a sudden get new bosses because now we have shareholders we have to please. And now all of a sudden it's no longer a passion. It's some job.
And, you know, we kind of really clued into this. A big moment for that was when we were doing digital seminars. Man, let's just put out more digital seminars. We can just film a person every day and spit one out. We'll have so many. More isn't always better.
Truth.
We decided to spin it. We decided to spin it and say, rather than spit out all these things, let's make them the best possible.
Yes.
A Budo Brothers original.
Works of art.
And slow down.
I had an offer when I started my dojo, and it was from somebody that was like, hey, I'll front the cost for your mats and a lot of your equipment. And it was just, you said something right there that just reminded me of that moment of not wanting to be in debt to somebody or owe when you were starting out, because it really does set you behind. And I was so uncomfortable with the idea of having this business and having, you know, my shiny new mats, but paid for by somebody else, having to owe and having to catch up to that. So in those terms, it was more important for me to be like, you know what, I'm actually going to run this school out of the basement of my house for another 3 months.
Validate it.
And and then I'll have, I made the money for it. I bought the mats. I own the mats. I still have some of them in the basement of my house, nice. 15 years later. But they're mine and filthy and gross and like covered in sweat and stuff, normally. But those were my mats, and I didn't have to buy them back or anything like that. So let me ask you for a Budo Brothers challenge in terms of growing pains. Because we kind of went all over the place here, and just for martial arts and entrepreneurship and everything else. Is there something on your mind that you would like to challenge our good listeners to in terms of growth and growing pains?
I have a Budo Brothers challenge. I read this in a book, so it's called Grit. So I'm not making this up for myself, but focused practice. There is probably an area in your life where you are hyper-focused on or trying to improve. And a lot of times you go through and do that thing on repetition without putting focus into the practice behind it. Like perfect practice.
That's great. Yep.
So whatever it is you're working on in your life, set a specific area that you could measure and practice at improving it.
Nice. And it might be painful, but that's growing pains. That's growing pains. Now, that's David, right. Before we end this episode, I gotta know, how the hell do they know that octopuses dream?
Okay, that's a really
have you
good
been thinking about that, right? For the whole
time? Like, how do they know that octopus? And it's not octopuses.
Octopuses.
No, it's octopi.
Octopetus.
Either of which are correct technically, but So that's see, I had the same thought, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, who's hooking up electrodes to some slimy octopus in a cave somewhere? So here's how it works. So you know that they can change their colors and camouflage in an instant, right? And to any surrounding that they're in. They can also change their topology almost. Like they change their skin to make it bumpier if they're around a bumpy rock, or to make it smooth if they're near a smooth rock. So they can actually change the surface of their skin, and they have instant control over all of this. So what happens is when they're sleeping, apparently, they're typically curled up and their tentacles are curled up underneath them, and they lay still. What they've observed is that while they're laying still, their colors and their skin will change and in seemingly random ways, instantly flashing back and forth, and not with their surroundings.
Wait.
And so,
I have to test this out, because that means if you fart in your sleep, it means you're dreaming because you did something.
in a way, I guess.
So maybe their just skin changes when there's lights out.
I don't know. I have to apologize to whoever I'm sleeping next to. I was dreaming of Taco Bell, and I couldn't no. So they observe them like that, and changing their colors and their shape. And I guess the idea behind this is they are thinking about an environment. They're seeing an environment in their dream, however fleeting, that they are matching their body to instinctually.
Crazy.
It is pretty wild, right?
Well,
yeah. Think about that next time you.
I'm gonna probably dream it.
At least you're not changing into a different color. Yeah. So
I'm
that's
probably gonna dream about an octopus tonight. I'm gonna dream about an octopus dreaming. Ooh, that's
the fourth level of Inception.
That is
exactly.
Really, yeah.
Speaking of growth, we're trying to grow our Budo Brothers podcast.
Absolutely.
So hit the subscribe button, comment, share, like, tell your friends. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I will catch you both on the next
All right, we'll see you next week, David.